designed to encourage, empower, and educate real estate professionals by sharing best practices from business leaders that are proven winners. I'm your host, Kyle Malnati, and this is Calibrate Real Estate. Broadcasting from the Mile High City. Thank you for tuning in to the Calibrate Real Estate podcast hosted by Kyle Malnati. Our esteemed guest today is Becky Barrick. Becky Barrick is a leader and principal with her Becky Barrick Associates, which is a group at Keller Williams in Tacoma, Washington. Say hi to our podcast audience, Becky.
Hey, everybody.
Becky and I got together on a phone call last week just to talk through some ideas, and we want to talk about growth of an organization. And we think that that's a special discussion as people are thinking of how to grow effectively, how to grow sustainably. So Becky, let's kind of identify your brokerage team that you have at Keller Williams and how you got that group started and how you've grown, because I know that you had mentioned that your team is just a rock star team and really helps support you and your efforts as you continue to move things forward.
Awesome. So I've been selling real estate for 16 years and I'm still dirt in my nails in the field doing the job. I love doing the job of selling real estate. So I love being the principal listing agent. I have 2 agent partners that are on my team, and we do that specifically so they're not pigeonholed into being a buyer's agent or a listing agent. They can do both. They're a partner in our firm, essentially, in our team. And then I have a transaction coordinator who does everything from start to finish. So whether it's a listing all the way through closing, buyers, everything. So anything that involves paper and clients and management, she handles. And then we have a marketing director who is, again, everything from social to implementation of systems and other things and all this other stuff. She does all of that. And then my husband is amazing, and he actually is our photographer. He makes sure everything else happens, basically. So like if I can't do whether it's a CMA or in a meeting an appraiser, he handles everything on that aspect. So that's our team.
Awesome. And how long has this current group been together? And then when did you decide at some point that you needed to grow a team? I know at Keller Williams, there's a pretty long history of having some mega teams, and that's something that we'll talk about. But how long have you been a team leader, and then also the group that's currently together? How long have you guys been together?
So the current team in place, our newest member joined. Our newest member joined the team in May, and prior to that, all of the unit of people that we've had involved with our team has been a little over a year with everybody together. And we've had ebbs and flows. I mean, we've had certain staffing hires that didn't work. We had other agents on the team that at the beginning of the year, we had 4 agent partners on our team. And it just wasn't one of those things that for me, it wasn't the right timing. It's not something that nobody leaves on bad terms with my team and with my company. It's just we're either not in alignment or there's something that we got to figure out together. So
I love that you use the word alignment, because I think with teams and people, sometimes you can think of things almost too much as it relates to their own personal objectives, but you're really driving together. And if you ever had a vehicle that's out of alignment, you get this rubbing, you get this friction, you get this heat that gets created because your tires or your wheels are out of alignment. And so what do you do as a team leader to address that? I think that having crucial conversations with team members when it doesn't feel like things are really moving smoothly are really important. So how do you approach that? Everybody's got a different strategy for doing that, but what's been successful for you as you address alignment issues?
So I think in general, it's easy to become a real estate agent, obviously, as we all know. But then moving into that leadership role or running the company role has been definitely a learning process. And so one of the most basic things that we put in place is we have a very straightforward contract that everybody signs when they join up. We do a 90-day review every single time. There's a standards and expectations that I have every team member sign, or I should say those in production primarily, that they sign. And when the 90 days comes, we look at it and we evaluate, are you on par with with that commitment. And then we do our 411s pretty consistently. So every 2 weeks, I review those with my team members. And then we are in our team meeting every week reviewing our pipelines. So, I mean, there's certain things as far as an accountability aspect that we've really upped the ante to keep us moving forward in alignment. And with my two previous agent partners that were on our team at the beginning of the year, like I was mentioning, they're no longer. It happened right at the end of the first quarter. They both came to me. They knew we were going to be talking about the review. They knew the standards and expectations that they had signed, and they knew moving forward, you know, what that meant. And that meant, okay, I'm going to help you. You're going to basically kind of do the things that we need to get you to be on production and at that level. And if they're not wanting to, or if it's not something that maybe works right now for their lives in that season, then it's okay. We just do our own thing. It's fine.
It's amazing how a deadline looming or a date in the calendar where people know that you're going to talk about that stimulates either that proactive conversation where they're reflecting on, okay, I've got to talk with Becky and I know that this is coming up. And it almost puts that, first of all, it takes the awkward out of the conversation because they know it's coming. And then secondly, you don't have to get them into a corner. They want to have that conversation. They know, look, this is what we signed off on and it's not been happening. And let's try to move forward amicably and do different things. And so I've got to know, just because I'm curious, what are some of your standards and expectations? What are some of the things that you have written out that aren't, you know, proprietary or anything like that? But what are some of the things that you expect of your team?
So if you're on sales and you work in our team, it is expected that you put 2 in escrow every single month. Not a ton. That's just what I expect. And it's something that I actually heard. I was at one of the conventions, it was last year, and of all things, Ben Kinney said it. And he's like, I love my people so much that I want them to succeed at such a level that, and I'm totally botching this, but I love and I care so much that I want them to be at that place. And that's the whole reason I'm doing it. It's not because you can't, you know, be successful if you only sell 1 house a month. But I know for them to hit their goals financially and have that freedom maybe for their families and for their lives, that's kind of like the barrier to entry. And so that's what I want them to be successful. And I want them to be successful so much that that's a standard.
I enjoy that because you're right. Real estate is not for the faint of heart. It's a stressful industry. It's a business that requires a lot of effort, a lot of off hours, a lot of working when other people aren't working. And so I think I agree with Ben. I agree with you that you want to set people up for that success. And there's a lot of other industries that you can work in that you can clock out, you can check out, and make a similar amount of money that you would be able to if you're doing 1 deal a quarter. And so I think if you're doing 2 in escrow every month, that's setting you up for doing, you know, somewhere between 4 and 6 per quarter. And I would say that that's a good level of productivity. I work in commercial real estate, and for what it's worth, I've always told each of my folks that when I first got started in the industry, long time ago, a decade ago, my goal was to have a deal close every month, which meant back into it, probably have 2 in escrow every month because you want to have a contingency if one of those deals falls apart. And of course, what ends up happening is you end up closing more than 2 because you get to that rhythm and you say, okay, now what does it take to get 3 in escrow to then close 2 a month? And then you just kind of look at that, and it gives you good, measurable short-term goals. I really like that. And I think you do set people up for success by giving them that standard of expectation. Okay, so let's talk about being a parent and in being in the workforce. I think that there's a lot of focus on working moms, and I think that that's great. I also think that, you know, working dads, working, you know, couples, I think that that's a very interesting discussion. So you'd mentioned that your husband's in the business and helps do a lot of the catch-all stuff, photography and some other things. And we'll talk about him. And then you've also got 3 kiddos, a son and 2 daughters. Your son's 12. And you've got a daughter that's 9 and one that's 4.5. So a nice range in between your kids there. And so what does it feel like to be in working in your craft, but then also having to manage a lot of the things on the home front as well? And what is life like as you're shuttling kids around? And what are some things that you do to remain efficient?
So to be quite, I mean, I don't know any difference. I don't know what it's like to not. My husband and I have been married for 17 years. I got married at 19. So we're truly a statistic that beat the other statistic, basically. So at 19 we got married, and I got into real estate at 21, and I had tremendous success. I did really well, actually, as a 21, 22, 23-year-old selling real estate. And we had had conversations about when we wanted to start our family and what we wanted to do. And I remember there was a very aware moment where I said, my God, is it going to be easier to do it just now and then figure it out? Or is it going to be harder? Like, is it going to be harder to stop, kind of maybe slow down a little bit now versus maybe later on? Is that going to be harder to stop? And I think, and we've made the decision. So at 25, I had our first son, and our first child. And then at 28, I had my second. And when I had my second, it was 2010. So I had my son in 2007. So the beginning of the end. That was awesome. And then I had my daughter at like the tail end. For us here, at least in Washington, it was kind of like, I defy it, like, or I say, it was like the car was still running, but it was just on fumes, and the fumes were out, and there was no more gas stations. Like, there was nothing around. It was like The Walking Dead. It was awful. And that was what happened in 2010. And when that happened, there was no option. I mean, there was nothing. I couldn't take any breaks. So I had a baby, and I went back to work really quickly, because you had to, and at that time, that was when my husband actually came and started helping me in real estate, because he was in another field. And because of the recession, that job was no longer there. And at that point, he did all the stuff that was necessary. I couldn't keep an assistant because I don't have money anymore. So he did that role. And then I didn't have a buyer's agent. So then he did that role. So it was like all these things we always worked together in a partnership to really continue to move the car down the hill, essentially. And then my kids are, shuttling between the kids and their schedules and our lives. I mean, thank God we have, Google Calendar, and it's easy and we can figure that all out. But my kids know, I work from home in the morning, and they're very well aware that what my job entails. And now we're in football season, so we're having later nights with them. But for the most part, I'm home by 6:30 every night. Like I, with the exception, I might take one night where I have a later appointment, but I'm home usually by 6:30 every night. So it doesn't come home with me.
I think it's great. And I almost feel like so I'm a dad of 3, and we're both similar ages. I almost feel like having kids, and for those that don't, I feel like it creates this very natural boundary that almost all of my clients understand. It's a very clear, I have to do this, or I need to do that. I want to do this, whether it's running kids around, or I would like to be at their practice. I'd like to see their game. And I think we're so blessed. And at times, if you don't step back and think about it, but we're so blessed to have the ability to do so many things electronically that didn't exist 20 or 30 years ago. And
they didn't exist like 15 years ago. We still had fax machines. I still had to meet people in person and get them to sign a contract.
I did too. Yeah, I got started in 2004, so 15 years ago. And you're absolutely right about that. It's incredible. And I had a mentoring session today with 6 of our agents that are on the newer side of the business. And I shared that with them as we were talking about physical delivery versus electronic delivery, which is in our listing agreements, and defining that. And I just said, guys, you got to think about this. For as much as you think the real estate industry is difficult, you don't have to be present doing all of this stuff. You can do a lot of it electronically, which has its downsides, of course, because people can get in touch with you kind of anytime, any day. But it's just amazing what our industry has done. And so I think it's kind of cool for those of us like yourself that got started, at 21. I got started at 22. Now, as we're feeling like we're on the older side of the industry that remembers fax machines and letters and all of that type of stuff, I have a lot of gratitude with how efficient our business can be. I really do. So I didn't realize that you were married at 19. We didn't talk about that. My wife and I are high school sweethearts. We waited until after college, but got married the year after college. And we have 3 kiddos as well. So we've got a lot of commonalities. I think that as you grow a team, it feels like you're growing your family at work, and then obviously your family growing. There are obligations and there are things that change as your team evolves, both at work and at home. And so now that you've got some kids that are older, you mentioned to me that you've got a son that's going into middle school or junior high. And what is that like? How does that feel for you as, of course, you remember him being much younger? And then what does that do also as they have a little bit more freedom and you're still trying to take care of everything at work?
So my son actually, he was in middle school. Last year was his first year in middle school. So this year is his second. And so I think it will be better because last year it just felt a little funny. It's just weird. It's weird when they get older and they have to do that. I feel that the way my husband and I are trying to raise our children is in a very, as holistic as possible. We live in the country, so we choose to not live in the city. We live actually in the country, and we live on property, and my kids are outside all the time, and I have a huge garden. We have chickens, we have dogs, we have this very, like, as much as I can give them really this awesome childhood experience. That's what I'm trying to do. They don't have, my son at 12 does not have a phone. He does not have his own computer. He doesn't have any of that stuff. So he's got access that my husband controls by his device, by turning on his internet or turning it off. So, I mean, we've just set some boundaries around our kids just because we didn't grow up with that stuff. And I think looking at it now, I feel like the kids these days, but I mean, realistically, there's almost like in real estate, it's the same thing. With too much freedom, it's like we have the freedom to do this or that or this or that. And it's like, sometimes there is too much freedom. Like you have to put parameters and boundaries around yourself, whether that's guarding your time, whether that's even in the form of the standards and expectations. There's freedom not to do that. But if you don't, then there's the consequences. And so it's kind of how we sort of live our life with our kids. And
I've got to dig into this more because I know that what you just said is easier said than done, because the pressure of having elementary school kids, we've got a fourth grader and then twins that are third graders, the requests for sleepovers and cell phones and all that type of stuff, it just happens because they see what other kids have in school. And so I commend you because I think that's wonderful. And I feel like I'm very aligned with how my wife and I are very aligned with how you've got things set up. So how have you maintained and just continued to say, look, this is our standard, and it can work this way at work too, but this is our standard and this is how we choose to live. This is our value system. I've just got to imagine that that's got to be a constant, you've got to be constantly investing in that this is our standard and we're not deviating from that. But how does that work for you?
I'm laughing because last night I picked my daughter up from cheer and she literally comes over to me and she goes, this little girl came over and wanted her to spend the night. And she goes, yeah, she asked me if I wanted to spend the night. And I said, that'd be fun. But then she goes, but I told her it's highly doubtful that my mom will allow that. Literally her words, highly doubtful. And it's not that like, I'm not like, don't do sleepovers or anything crazy like that, but it's just in general, like, I mean, those three humans that I made are the most important things that I get to nurture and help them grow developmentally, emotionally, socially, intellectually, like throughout life. Like that's like, I'm going to take that more seriously than pretty much anything else. So when it comes to what they do, I mean, the kids are pretty well aware of that. My husband and I have conversations with them all the time. We do dinner together all the time. We do breakfast. We have a lot of time together as a family, which is amazing because this industry does allow for that. I mean, the fact that we can adjust our schedule and we can put those parameters up, they get so much of our time. In fact, during the summer, I take Mondays, I usually work a half day on a Monday, and I take the rest of it and we'll go and have an adventure. I call it Mondays with Mom, and we do it in the summer, and that way then the kids know. And then if they press me or if they say, hey, why are you still working? It's like, well, because if you want this time for us to go do something really awesome and fun, I have to lead generate. Well, what's lead generate? That's me getting on the phone. Well, why are you doing that? Because if I don't get on the phone and I don't make appointments and I don't close those appointments, which is what I do when I get the appointment, then we have no money. And they're like, oh, okay, cool. So you should get back on that phone. I'm like, that's exactly what I'm going to be doing. Thanks.
Oh my gosh, I love that. If I swear you've got to just dial it back for the last 2 minutes, re-listen to that. If you're ever feeling like you're in a funk, you've got to listen to that because it's totally true. And I think as as a real estate professional, your family is in it with you, whether they like it or not. We've all signed up for this industry, and our kids know it. You know, every now and again, you're going to work with dad on a Saturday, or you're going to see dad at an open house. You're going to see dad at appointments, and it's just how that works. Same thing, Becky, with you, with mom. You know, that's how it works. And I think it's great because they have that. It's such a good example that they've got that ingrained, is like, you want these things, this is what we have to do to make those things happen. So I love it.
Well, and I will say we set goals with our children as far as like, if we hit a number, you know, if we sell so many houses, we go here, you know, if we do this, then we get this. And it's like a family goal. And so then it's been nice because when we went to Hawaii, it was like, okay, mommy has to sell 100 houses. We have to sell 100 houses, and then we get to go to Hawaii. And so then it became a conversation every night at dinner. Mommy, did you sell another house today? Or how many houses did you sell today? Did you sell 5 houses today? I'm like, that's cute. No, I did not sell 5 houses today. But it's just the idea that it gets them kind of tied into the goal setting. And like you mentioned, it's so important for these kids to learn. I mean, things aren't just handed. I mean, I guess they kind of are, sort of, but they're not. Like, life is not handed to you. None of this is handed. Like, it's all something that through the recession and through blood, sweat, and freaking tears, like there's only one reason why we're here. Like, we've busted it to be here. And I'm not, you know, that's what they need to learn, because if they want something in life, they have to work their butts off to make that happen.
I agree. And one of the things for the audience that you might not know is Becky and I got connected because we're both Realtor Magazine 30 Under 30 honorees. Becky in 2011 and myself in 2012. And one of the things we talked about as we got prepared for this discussion was that, first of all, the Young Professionals Network seems to us like it's a little bit of a joke, a little bit of a farce. That
I wouldn't say a joke. So it's a real thing. It's cool. I mean, it just came after us. Like, I'm not a young professional. I'm like a middle-aged person, I guess. I don't know.
Well, 37, both of us with 3 kids. I mean, it feels that way at times. And so I definitely didn't mean that the organization's a joke, but it feels to us like really we feel like we're on the other side of, like you said, middle age. And that's an okay thing. Like, I love being a dad. I love having kids that are getting bigger, and that I can talk to them and share my dreams and aspirations and goals, and have kids that are little accountability partners, which I could tell around the dinner table. They're like, how's it going, Mom? How's it doing? How's our trip? But being a 30 under 30 is this very interesting thing, because I've heard other people talk about this with the magazine, but then also just honorees, that it is very much kind of the younger cool club. And it's a recognition nationally. It's very, very, very highly sought after, very competitive. And there's a lot of people that apply multiple years before they ever get it. So that experience, what did that mean to you, you know, going on almost, 9-10 years ago, and then, or 8 years ago, if I can do math. But then also now, as you reflect, like it's been quite a while and you've had a lot of things develop. What have you learned in that last 8 years from having that major accolade, but then you've now got so much that's different? You had 2 kids, one that was probably just born and the other that wasn't even here yet. So what are some of the things, reflections that you had since the 30 under 30 accolade?
So 30 under 30, that is still to this day one of, I love that. That was something that I remember getting that magazine at 22 and 23, and I was like, I will make that happen. And when my first year in the real estate industry, I've always been with Keller Williams. So for 16 years, I've been with Keller. And my first year in, I was Rookie of the Year for the whole Northwest region, which at the time was really tiny. So it wasn't like it is now, but that was really cool. And that was kind of my first like badge. And then I kept thinking, I'm going to get that. And like you mentioned, I applied, I think twice maybe prior. And of all things, the years were better. I made more money. I sold more houses in the years that I did apply. The year I got it is the year it was like the worst of my career. It sucked because it was 2010. But the reality is that was such an awesome thing. And I'm really grateful. I think when you look at the people that are a part of the 30 under 30, I mean, they're so driven and they're so accomplished, and so many, in fact, I was having a conversation with my husband about there's so many of them have gone on to do multiple businesses and different ventures, and maybe they still sell real estate or in the real estate realm, but they're doing something with it in a different manner. And I find it so fascinating, and I really, to be a part of it and to be within that organization is so cool. So it was a huge accolade for me. It really helped, I believe, my business in a very positive way. If anything, it gave me confidence. So that was cool. But in 8 years, so when I got 30 under 30, I I mean, there were other people married and things, but I want to say I remember going to Chicago, and I think I was the only one that not only had a kid, but I had 2 kids. And I was a woman that had 2 babies. And as a woman that sells a lot of real estate with 2 little kids, there is a little bit of a difference. There just is. I mean, from a sex standpoint, there is. I mean, I remember being pregnant. The only time I've ever faced any of that kind of discrimination per se is when I was super, super pregnant, and I'd be at a listing appointment, and literally I'd be told, you should probably go home and rest, or you should probably go home and take care of your kid, or you should probably, you're not going to be able to take care of my listing because you're going to have a baby. I'm like, you would never say that to a man that's going to have a baby. Like, you would never say that. So that was the only thing for me. So I've had to be a little bit more resilient, and I've had to put in place systems. When I had my last one, I had systems definitely in place, and I had a better, situation. But there's been a lot of things you have to learn, and I've picked up throughout the years.
Well,
I think I've rabbit holed that.
No, that's it's great, because that adversity is, I'll say, coming from a male's perspective. My wife and I had 3 kids in the span of 16 months. So I mean,
I can't even imagine that. I cannot.
Now, my wife had the 3 kids,
yeah.
And obviously I was certainly a part of that. But I will say that, not even thinking about being the producer, being the one that's at the kitchen table or at the office with someone that's actually going to be signing a listing agreement, facing that discrimination, and the way you put it, I really feel like that's something that you're like, I can do this. I'm capable. I'm not, I'm not going to let you down. How did you work through that? And obviously, how did you feel when it didn't work out, and you could tell that it was just not going to happen? Someone was not able to overcome that objection. But then also, talk to me about a few people that really believed in you and said, I think you can do this, while you're having children, and you are showing, and you're about to deliver. How did that all work for you? Because I find that fascinating.
So earlier on in my career, because when you're 21, 22, 23 years old, who do you sell to? You don't have my immediate family was the only people that lived here in the state of Washington. Like, I didn't have grandma and grandpa that needed me to sell their house. I didn't have a cousin that needed me to sell their house. And all my friends were still in college. Like, who was I going to sell a house to? So I was school of hard knocks and cold calling. And so I would call a lot of expireds and canceleds, and that was always my wheelhouse. And so those earlier years, like when I was pregnant with my son, that sucked, because you're going into a very cold environment and they don't know you. And I'm a very large pregnant woman, so I'm like, it didn't work out super great. With my daughter during the recession was just what it was. There was no way around that. Like, it was almost like, as God is my witness, I channeled Scarlett O'Hara, which is my daughter's middle name is Scarlett for that reason. But it was, I channeled, as God is my witness, I'll never go hungry again. That was my mantra. Like, literally, that was my mantra throughout those years, is God is my witness, I will never go hungry again. We didn't lose anything. It just sucked. And it was gritty and hard, and I would take anything. So if it was a short sale, I became an expert in short sales at that time. If it was a foreclosure, got to go down to the auction and deal with that circus. I did whatever it took to make ends meet, to do it, to keep my feet moving forward. And then with my last child, it wasn't that hard, because my business is so big in referrals and past client base now. Between agent referrals, client referrals, my amazing sphere, my amazing client base, we are about 90%. So, it was at that point, people are just super excited because they know me, they love me, they've worked with me before, and they've kind of seen that journey. So it wasn't as crazy. And that was the one pregnancy where I was able to set myself up to take, I say I took time off. I took maybe like a little bit of time off, but I had systems and a great team behind me at that time to move us forward.
Gosh, I love that. It's such an empowering story. And I think we have these situations where you have to rise up to the challenge, you have to rise up to the occasion. And I feel like that creates more confidence. And so for you, like you said, having the third child probably felt in many ways kind of like, hey, I've been here, done that. This is no big deal. You know, the third child's always kind of mangled, you know, it's got Cheerios in the hair and no shoes on. And it's just not the same experience as the pristine, perfect little first baby. So I can absolutely see how that has marked you and empowered you and in some ways in an appropriate way hardened you.
Yeah.
And thank you for sharing those feelings as there's obviously people who come in with expectations that you're like, that's not me. I can absolutely still make this work. And so I think that that's important. And I think there's a lot of moms that'll connect to that, and a lot of fathers and a lot of husbands that will connect and say, I mean, I'm thinking of a couple of people in my own organization as well as my wife. Like, I want to talk to them like, have you ever felt like you were discriminated against because you were pregnant? Sometimes it's like kind gestures, but other times it's like,
Right.
oh, I think I'm okay, you know? And so amazing stuff. Okay. Our final two questions that I ask everyone. One is tried and true, and we've asked a lot of people. The other is becoming more developed. And so I'll set up the newer one, and then we'll end the show with our classic last question. So the new one is, what's your happy place? And there's a variety of answers that have occurred. Sometimes it's an activity or an event, but we have a very stressful business. We've got a lot of demands, and then put on that, you've got a spouse and you've got kids, and you've got other things going on, things that are constantly pulling. So when you feel like you need to really get away for a moment, and I think of the movie Happy Gilmore, where you like find your happy place. What are those activities? What are those things? What are those areas or events that really resonate to you to find your happy place?
Super easy for me to answer. I'm a complete and total homebody. I love being at home, and I love what we've created. We have a very unique house, and then we also have our cabin, our beach house. And so for me, my happy place is completely being in my garden. I have an amazing garden. It's huge, and I love just the physical component of it. I get my kids out there with me. It's very methodical and very meditative for me. I love it. It makes me happy. And I don't have this thing in my hand. I can't use it because I'm using my hands. So I love that I don't have that. And I love that I'm just out there in nature and in God's creation. It's fantastic. So that would be one thing. And then at our cabin, we have, we're on the Hood Canal, which is an amazing location. If you're familiar with Washington State, it's awesome. North America's largest natural fjord. You're welcome for that fact. But it is an awesome and beautiful place. And I find such solace just taking my paddleboard out there and just being alone and being in the middle of the water. And I come back so happy. And then give me a glass of wine and I'm real happy. It's fantastic.
I love those answers. That is a great answer. Becky is a homebody like nobody, and we have a lot of similarities. You know, we've got a lake property that we're planning on building a house on, and I absolutely love. I don't do a great job gardening, but I love planting things. And you're right. It's I think with real estate, sometimes it's very difficult, even though we're in a very tangible business. You can see the property, you can meet the people. It's a longer phase of transaction. I mean, you've got a cycle that's not a day. You typically are in escrow for 30 to 45 days. It may take 30 to 45 days to get a listing, or years to get a listing. So it feels to me like when you have the instant gratification, and not in a negative way, but being able to improve something, first of all, being in a garden and pruning and taking away some of the dead stuff and composting that, and then also seeing some of the fruits of your labor and growth. I mean, it's just amazing. Good stuff. Okay. Last question. It's the question I saved for the end. It's based on a Christian song called Dear Younger Me. The idea is you're writing a letter to yourself, and now that you're in your late 30s, you're reflecting back. It's the advice you wish you knew when you were 22 is the way I like to say that. And what would you give, now that you've accomplished what you have, what's some advice that you'd give to yourself if you had the opportunity to connect with the younger version? And then further, maybe you've got some young team members that are in their early 20s, and you can impart some wisdom on them now that you've experienced what you have. What's a few tips that you'd give to the younger audience and that's listening?
Oh, that's so hard. I think for me, what I can say is I'm grateful that I never gave up on what we held dear as dreams for us. So I think continuing to just dream and dream big. I know that moving forward with our company and with our team has been one of the growing pains for me was dreaming big again, allowing myself to, because the recession really killed that. You know what I mean? It just did. It was like, I'm going to dream practical, I'm not going to dream big, because practical is safe and easy, big is scary. And I don't want to then get there. I don't want to dream it and then not have it happen, because that's what happened. So I think I would really encourage my younger self just to stay focused on the dreams at hand, the values what we value, what we want, what it looks like for our family, what our goals are as a family. Cause that's always at the end of the day, why I'm doing this. It's not to have my name in lights. I do this to create a life for our family, for what our goals are, and for the lives of my younger teammates. My advice to my younger teammates is, if they could keep every house they ever own and not ever sell, that'd be awesome, because I wish I did that. And start saving, get out of debt, and invest, because there's so much power when you have no debt, and there's so much power when you have a ton of money in savings. And when the world goes on sale, like it always does at some point, it's so much better to be the one that's controlling your ability than to be the one that's struggling in the bottom, because that sucked. So that's kind of, I guess, maybe what I would tell myself, even though that doesn't really sound like, I don't know, that's more of like an aspiration. I don't know.
I love that our podcast audience knows, first of all, I did not set Becky up to give those answers, because I say that pretty much every episode. I mean, those are the things. It's get out of debt if you have it, live like a college student while you're just finished with being in college, if you went to college. I mean, I think a lot of people level up their lifestyle when their income levels up, and that's a hard thing to resist that temptation. And I just loved your answers. They just great stuff.
Can I add one thing? Because this is the one thing I will say that's actually been incredibly beneficial for us. So there was a time just like you said, because 2007, the world was still on fire. We bought a house on an 80-20. Do you remember 80-20? 80-20s. It was interest only. I mean, it was like everything bad about the lending industry was what we did. We didn't do a negative amortization, but it was like not good. So we did that product. And the whole idea was, well, yeah, the values are going to go up because everything goes up, and it's fine, and it's fine, and it's fine. Got cars, got this, got all this crap. At 25 years old, with a baby and everything, we had more debt, we owed more out, and we paid our monthly outgo financially as a household was more at 25 years old, making way less than what it is now at 37, making way more. So my husband and I had a conversation about that at that point in time when it was like rock bottom and it sucked, and we had to look at all of our debts and all of our outgo and like what it was. And I remember saying, we will never, ever, ever be at a place. I don't care if I make $1 million a year. I do not care. If this is our outgo right now, we're never going to have more than this. And we've never have. Our car payments are way less. If actually, we don't even have one. Our mortgage on our house now is less, even though it's bigger. We just put more money down. You finance better. That was always what we kind of aspired to. So it's now leveraged us to where that money on the crap and the stuff is just being stashed and stocked and stashed and stocked. Because we all know we ain't going to get none of that like later in life. Like, we're independent contractors.
Oh man, I love that answer. It is so perfect. And you're right. Having lived through the recession really marks you, and you remember that, and then couple that with having kids and obligations. These are the things that I think that our generation felt and learned through, and we're such kindred spirits. It's so amazing that I can be in Colorado, you can be in Washington State, and we have such similar ideas and thought processes. And I'm so sad for this conversation to end, and it's so wonderful. Thank you for sharing your thoughts and wisdom. Thank you for being open to our audience, because I think there's a lot of people that'll hear this and feel like maybe they're struggling. I'll tell you that I have situations that continue to happen to this day where I will say I need to go back and listen to that episode 20 episodes ago, because I'm feeling in a spot like I can't get out of it. And so there will be encouragement that someone will get that you've never met before from having this conversation, and that is powerful. So thank you.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Becky Barrick, I really appreciate it. I know that you're going to continue to hit those goals and hit those trips to Hawaii with selling 100 houses. And I love that. I just can't wait to see what you've got coming up ahead. If someone wants to connect with you, what's a good way to connect with you? If someone wants to send a referral, across the nation, someone's moving into the Tacoma area, how do they connect with you?
Well, my email, you could just send it to my email. It's just Becky@BeckyBarrick.com. That's pretty simple. That's just Becky@BeckyBarrick.com. And then there's my website that is obviously available. It's just BeckyBarrick.com. I went very original.
Keep it simple.
My Facebook and my business Facebook, my Facebook and Instagram is just Becky Barrick Realty, which obviously that's just keeping that simple. And my others are just my name. I mean, it's like about as easy as it gets.
I love
Nothing
it.
crazy.
Google Becky Barrick,
Pretty much, just Google me.
And you'll figure it out. Well, Becky, thank you so much. And for Becky, our esteemed guest, our podcast producer is Kayla Davis. I'm Kyle Malnati, and thanks for tuning in. As I love to say, we will see you around the neighborhood. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.